So now that we've thought about the themes, we're going to look at an example essay you could write for Hamlet. So students often struggle to conceptualize what a textual integrity essay will look like. Because we're so dependent on writing about themes, it becomes difficult to write about anything else. So we're going to look at one example essay plan. Keep in mind that this is only one way to address the subject. It's just supposed to give you an idea of structure. There are lots of other ideas that you could focus on and lots of other textual integrity essays you could try and write. So the first thing you need to think of when you're writing your essay is the thesis. So your thesis should be about the idea of why your text is a classic or about how it has textual integrity. So in this case we might say, Hamlet has textual integrity because its themes are exquisitely constructed by its dramatic structure and language techniques. So obviously in this kind of thesis, we would have to focus extensively on dramatic structure and language technique. In the first paragraph, because of course we want to pick a broad idea before we move on to a specific, we might focus on the notion of genre. And we might consider the conventions of revenge tragedy genre and how Hamlet fits them and applies to them. And of course we do state explain support on that. Then we might consider the dramatic 5-act structure and how it helps intensify the tragedy, and we would do state explain support on that. In paragraph 2, we might look at characterization, because again that can be orienting for the reader. And so we might consider the characterization of Hamlet as a Renaissance man and do some state explain support on that so that we can see an example of him being learned or thoughtful or concerned about nobility. And we might also consider some examples of his wit and wordplay, which really characterises the late English Renaissance. That would lead us nicely into a paragraph on language techniques. So we might think about the language of dilemma and madness. So we might consider the feminine endings of iambic pentameter and em-dashed prose that shows uncertainty, madness, and the sense of dilemma that Hamlet is feeling. We might also have a look at Ophelia's songs. So the fact that she can only speak the truth when she's mad. You might even think about the rambling conversation she has where she offers people rosemary and other herbs for thoughts. And then we might move into a consideration of relationships. So we'd acknowledge that parent-child relationships form a large part of the play. And then we might consider a couple of interesting relationships rather than trying to push through all of them. So we might pick Gertrude and Hamlet and talk about their Oedipus complex type relationship, and Polonius and Ophelia and her lack of choice in that situation. And then we'd probably link this to Hamlet's death and Shakespeare's possible guilt so that we work in a little bit of personal context. In the 5th paragraph, we might pick motifs. So we might pick the motif of corruption and deception that moves throughout the play. And then we might think about Denmark, the setting, and the idea of the great chain of being so that we can involve context in what we're talking about. We might consider Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's disloyalty. And then we might talk about Hamlet's antic disposition and the idea of the players who are able to fake real life. Now in those situations we would of course pick a state explain support for each of them. So you must always be backing up everything you say. You can't just say it is that. You're supposed to be focusing on why it is and proving it is that way. So you also need to think about critics' reviews. Here are some web links that can help you. We have a collection of lots and lots of essays at this one, which is theatrehistory.com. It's the Hamlet entry, and there's quite a lot of good stuff there. So you'll be able to read through a whole lot of those things. We have Samuel Taylor Coleridge's essay on Hamlet, so you should know that Samuel Taylor Coleridge is a romantic poet, but he also did some critical work, and that's at absoluteshakespeare.com, which is worthwhile reading. And we also have a third collection here with Shakespeare Online. The original article is really fairly ordinary and obvious, but there are some really interesting related articles that go into different ways you might read Hamlet's character. So it will help you with aspects of characterization. That's the end of this lesson.